Good evening, one and all. Myself D. Karthik, Regional Sales Manager at Chennai Region in Sun Life Division, Sun Pharma. Dear doctors, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all for today's webinar. Doctors, we at Sun Pharma are committed of reaching people and touching lives by providing quality products. With this belief in this current crisis of COVID-19, we have made Favipiravir affordable for Indian patients with the launch of FluGuard 200, 400, 800 mg. Doctors, in today's webinar, our eminent speaker would be sharing with you all his own clinical experiences with Favipiravir in COVID-19 patients. Doctors, let me introduce and welcome our eminent speaker, Dr. Yuvarajan, completed MD, DNB, FCCP, EDRM. Doctor is currently working as a professor and head Department of Respiratory Medicine, Sri Manakala Vinayagar Medical College, Puducherry. About our speaker, Doctor was a university topper in MD examination from MUHS, Nashik, Maharashtra, India. Awarded fellow in College of Chest Fusion, FCCP by American College of Chest Fusion, USA. Awarded European Diploma in Respiratory Medicine from European Respiratory Society. And selected as a future leader in the international workshop on lung health held in Prague, Jan 2020. Also awarded as an outstanding pulmonologist of the decade in the national conference Pulmus Sleep Meet held in Nagpur 2020 from Honorable Health Secretary, Government of Maharashtra. Doctor also given many speeches at various state level, national level, international level conferences. On this note, I am handing the session to Dr. S. Yuvarajan. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Karthik, for the nice intro. I think good evening, one and all. Today, I'm going to share my experience on the role of Favipiravir, which is one of the most commonly used antiviral drugs in day-to-day practice in this COVID pandemic. And I'm going to discuss with you in short what is this COVID and what are the common symptoms and typical presentation of COVID. And at the same time, we'll discuss in a case-based approach some 2-3 with the cases so that how they are presenting and what is the what are the different atypical presentation of the COVID pneumonia. At the same time, how in which group of patients this Favipiravir is helpful. So without wasting much of time, I think I'll go directly to the topic. So before going to the topic, let me just in a brief intro, let me just tell you about what is this COVID-19 pandemic. I think this is actually not very new. Like I think even a paramedics and non-medical also nowadays knowing about the COVID pandemic because of mass media propagation and also extensive the extensive the publicity that is created by media. And at the same time, because of the panic situation that is created, and really it is one of the dreadful pandemic that we faced till these days. As we know, what is COVID? It is nothing but coronavirus disease 2019, which is a pandemic due to a novel strain of COVID coronavirus, and which causes severe acute respiratory syndrome. That's why it is called as SARS-CoV-2. So what is actually, it can cause severe pneumonia that can progress to ARDS along with a multi-organ disease. What are the common symptoms of COVID? I think this is not very new. This is for those who are general practitioners and those who are students. That will be very helpful. Like that's why I'm just telling you all these things because everyone knows this. What are the typical symptoms of COVID? The usual presentation will be a fever. Fever will be maybe a low grade or maybe a high grade fever. Most of the patients will present the fever. Almost like 70-90% of the patients presents the fever, along with the chills sometimes. And dry cough, 60% to 86% of the people present dry cough. I'll tell you one thing: the cough, maybe early symptom, maybe one of the worsening symptoms in patient with the COVID, because presence of hacking or irritable cough in any patient with the COVID, you should always think that the COVID has caused such a extensive damage to the lung. and it can cause such an interstitial thickening, interstitial inflammation and all. So that will cause a severe hacking cough. That is another terrible sign that you should not miss. So most common presentation will be fever followed by dry cough and shortness of breath. I think this is most of the patients who presents with moderate to severe pneumonia. They present with shortness of breath. Roughly around 53 to 80% of patients present with shortness of breath. So that this actually shortness of breath is very common in patients with moderate to severe pneumonia, not in patients with the mild, mild or asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic cases of COVID-19 illness. Fatigue reported in 38% of cases. Myalgia, 15 to 44% of cases. And this fatigue, myalgia, and fever, these are the common symptoms of what we see nowadays. Cough, yes, of course, those patients who are having or who had a chronic respiratory disease, those patients who also had allergic rhinitis or any chronic respiratory disease, they present with a dry cough. And those patients who presents very late to us, like in the form of lung significant lung involvement, that can also present the cough. Shortness of breath mainly seen in moderate to severe pneumonia, which extends to lung involvement, and that shows the extent of involvement of the lung by the COVID-19. Not only that, shortness of breath may be due to other causes also. Not only the pneumonia, progressive ERD cause shortness of breath. As you know that COVID-19 can cause damage to any of the organs. As you know, the COVID-19 also causes vasculopathy. It can lead on to the some clots, that is thrombi within the pulmonary vessels. It can aggravate or can lead to the pulmonary embolism. That itself can reach the shortness of breath. Or sometimes, in case of severe COVID pneumonia, as a part of multi-organ involvement, it also involves the heart, and it causes myocarditis, and that can also lead to the shortness of breath. So all these things can, present as a scenario, but common presentation will be a fever, fatigue, and myalgia. There are a lot of atypical presentation also will be seen in extremes of age, mainly in the old age group. Uh, what commonly we see is that diarrhea, presence of diarrhea will be there. The typical symptoms of diarrhea will be watery stools will be there. At the same time, the patient also presents with the headache just before the fever, and weakness and rhinorrhea. These are the symptoms that also commonly present. And some people, the patients, particularly those who are well educated, they could easily feel that the loss of taste and loss of smell sensation, that is ageusia and anosmia. That is one of the most one of the signs that you see in a specific patient that who can sense these type of symptoms. What are the complications of COVID? As we know that COVID, even though it involves multiple organs, lung is a predominant organ that is involved in the form of severe pneumonia that can lead to ARDS. And it can also cause acute liver injury. It can cause myocarditis and cardiac injury. It can lead to all the vasculopathy, including thromboembolic events, not only in the pulmonary vasculature, but also in the cerebral vessels also. It can lead to the stroke. It can lead to acute kidney injury, and neurological manifestations will include impaired consciousness, acute cerebrovascular accident, and shock. So one of the most dreadful complication of COVID-19 illness is nothing but cytokine storm syndrome, which is nothing but the extensive host inflammatory response to the COVID-19. So because of that, you will have a extensive tissue damage because of the cytokine storm. That tissue damage leads to the worsening of symptoms. The patient can have, progression of the disease in the form of ARDS, in the form of worsening of kidney injury, in the form of sepsis, and that leads to the significant morbidity and mortality. So how do you classify this COVID-19 disease severity? So we can classify the illness as mild, moderate, severe. As you know that mild patients, they are symptomatic patients, meeting the case definition of COVID-19. As I just told you, any patient who had a history of contact with any other patient with COVID. But as you know that in pandemic, when we are facing a peak number of cases, the contact history is negligible. Like most of the patients are getting this COVID symptoms. So any patient in this season have history of fever, okay, history of cough or history of weakness, fever and all, definitely ideally you should rule out this COVID-19 illness. And all symptomatic patients meeting the case definition of COVID-19 without the evidence of viral pneumonia or hypoxemia. You note this point, this is very important. Which group of patients we should classify as mild? These patients should not have evidence of viral pneumonia. The lung involvement should not be there, ideally, as per definition, or the patient should not have any signs and symptoms of hypoxemia. Actually, hypoxia, you should not tell us hypoxia, it is hypoxemia. So that is actually a very clear-cut evidence that the patient is having mild form of illness. In moderate group of patients, the same patient who presents with the clinical signs of pneumonia, as you know, that commonest sign of pneumonia will be a fever, chills and rigors, cough with dyspnea, very important. But there are no signs of other signs of severe pneumonia, including hypoxemia or hypoxia. That is just in the pulse oximetry, what we see, if SpO2 is more than 90, but normally what you see, SpO2 is more than 94, that's well and good. 90 to 94, that comes under the moderate group of pneumonia. So these patients have the features of pneumonia, but it is not so severe to cause a terrible disease. But this patient has to be carefully monitored, and that group of patients should have SpO2 of more than 90% room air. Whereas severe pneumonia, the same patient who had all the signs of, who is having all the signs of clinical signs of pneumonia, like fever, cough, and breathlessness. Along with that, they should have some, terrible signs and symptoms like respiratory rate more than 30 breaths per minute, and severe respiratory distress or saturation in room air less than 90%, that is measured by pulse oximetry. So this is a clinical therapeutic staging proposal. That is actually, you could see what really happens. This slide is very good. You could see that what exactly happens after the entry of virus into the host. You could see the patient presents with the mild symptoms like mild constant like fever greater than 99.6 or dry cough initially. And after some time, this is the early infection, that is a viral response. After 1 week, that's a stage 2. Like it comes, like that is a stage. 7 to 14 days, you should be very careful, because that is a stage these patients, the host inflammatory response take to the action, and you will have all sorts of damage that occurs in this period. So exactly, if you want to tell what is the duration, is almost like 11.5 days on an average. If you see from the date of symptoms to the 11.5 days, so the 11.5 days is the time that like the patient can have a worsening of their own symptoms. That's why the second week is very crucial when you just carefully monitor the patients. So you could see that is a pulmonary phase that has two different 1 second different two, that is 2A and 2B. So all these phases, this 2A and 2B is predominantly by the host inflammatory response phase, and that is responsible for the major damage. You could see in the mild constant symptoms, you will have fever and dry cough, and the sign what you see clinically is the, as you know, the lymphocytes are, T lymphocytes are very important, helpful for combating any viral infections. You could see lymphopenia. And in stage 2, you could see that one of the dangerous sign and symptom is that shortness of breath along with hypoxia, along with hypoxemia. If you just calculate, the PaO to FaO2 ratio, when you just have a chance to do a ABG, it will be less than 300 millimeter mercury. And when you do X-ray, you could see the abnormal chest in the form of chest infiltrates. You could see the peripheral consolidation and some typical signs of COVID pneumonia. And you could see the transaminitis, and you could see the low normal platelet. Very important, because when the pneumonia is there, you should always rule out the bacterial infection. This procalcitonin is one of the important biomarker we do for severe ongoing bacterial sepsis and bacterial pneumonias. So these patients typically have very low or normal procalcitonin. That is one of the indicator of that we are dealing with the viral pneumonia. And in stage 3, is one of the thing is that if it is allowed to progress, so it goes to hyperinflation phase, and in this stage is very crucial. The patient can progress to ARDS, the patient can progress to sepsis and shock, the patient can have a myocarditis and cardiac failure. In this phase, when you see the inflammatory phase is predominantly like taking it to the peak, so you will see elevation of all the inflammatory mediators. The commonest inflammatory mediators that we do to assess the how far the host response is there for this patient, we commonly do CRP, LDH, and interleukin 6. But interleukin 6 we typically do mainly when we are planning for a tocilizumab. Otherwise, we do CRP and LDH and D-dimer and ferritin, and of course troponin, NT-proBNP also in moderate to severe cases. So all these markers will be elevated in the patients with moderate to severe pneumonia. So what are the drugs should be used? So what you should do, as we know that the progression of the disease is the rapid, mainly in elderly people. We don't allow them to progress for a severe disease, because as you know that in best of the centers also, in patients who are having a severe ARDS, the chance of survival after doing all your enthusiastic ventilator protocols and all other things, the chance of survival sometimes, like, only 60%. So that's why we don't allow them to progress. So early intervention is always important. As I used to tell to my students most of the times, when you are dealing with an infection, hit hard and early hard. Hit hard and early hard. Whatever you want to give, don't delay it, give it, and you give it so hard that the viral or any microorganism should not flourish from that. But it should be, maybe initially you may go for empirical therapy when you're suspecting bacterial this thing. Here we have a facility for doing COVID testing, that is RT-PCR. You can get the report in a matter of only on the same day only, or next day also. We have antigen test which can give you a report within 2 hours. So all these things, after confirming that, you can just use all the antiviral therapies. So drugs should be used as early in the disease course as possible to achieve any meaningful effects. So COVID, this is a good study. A COVID-19 patient benefit from early antiviral therapy, a comparative retrospective study. Okay. In this study, what they found is that the group with early antiviral treatment responded demonstrated 7 days shorter in the viral clearance time when compared to the group with late antiviral treatment. This is actually is well-known fact. The viral replication most of the times, it goes up to 7.5 to 9th or 10th day only. So any patient who are coming to us very late after a week, this is always, like, it's not antiviral therapy may not be much beneficial because already it has caused so much damage. It may not be beneficial in that group of patients. So that's why those patients who present early, without any delay, if you start antiviral therapy, so the viremia load will be less. So that our assumption is that in the viremia load is less, post-inflammatory response also can be reduced. At the same time, the target organ damage also can be reduced, and you can have a very good survival rate and very good response to the antiviral therapy when you do in the early phase. So one more thing is that early intervention likely improves the mortality in COVID-19 infection. So many of the studies has told that those patients whom you have a chance to treat them early when they present to early. So don't take them lightly. You give them all sorts of therapy, whatever we have, as we know that it is one of the dreadful diseases that we see today. So that's why we don't want to take risk. So we can give this antiviral therapy in these patients, even though it has some, questionable role. There are many people who have just question us like whether this viper is really working or not. Like, see, since we are dealing with a dreadful disease, why we should take a chance? We don't know which patient will progress. We don't know which patient will be asymptomatic. We don't know which patient. So that's why there are some parameters that I am following that I'm going to discuss with you. So that group of patients definitely we should give antiviral. We should not take risk in that group of patients. So what are the treatment options that are available for COVID-19? So one is supplemental care, supportive care. So basically those patients who are asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic or mild symptoms, no lung involvement, no evidence of pneumonia. So these group of patients can be given a home isolation, home care, supportive care, all this, this multivitamins, and for fever you can give antibiotics and all these things, adequate fluid intake, okay, fruits and all these things, adequate rest, all these things has to be given for this group of patients. Those patients who are symptomatic, particularly those patients who are having a persistent fever and all these things, they come to you early. So definitely antiviral can be given. So antiviral, there are two options. One is injectable, another one is oral drug. So injectable is remdesivir. The remdesivir is one of the promising and it's one of the very good drug that, as far as we saw in our experience, that remdesivir works in selected patients and it is really good. It prevents the progression, it shortens the duration of illness. And as you know that recently FDA has changed the approval from EUA to approved. It's one of the only approved injectable drug for COVID-19 in US. Not only that, second most important thing is favipiravir. Even though it is a oral drug, it is one of the most challenging drug. So it helps to shorten the duration. It helps to prevent the progression of disease, as we have seen in many patients. And at the same time, it is it is less cumbersome. This favipiravir with not much of adverse effects, as far as I have seen. So other things like other than antivirals, what we can do is antibodies. Like, as you know that there are convalescent plasma therapy and all, hyperimmunoglobulins can be tried. But based on the trials, these are not much helpful. But these are helpful in very selected group of patients. And most important thing, other than antiviral, one should not miss out that. As I already told you, Instead of virus causing damage, the post-inflammatory response causes potential damage in the subsequent time. So that's why, in order to reduce the potential damage because of the post-inflammatory response, definitely antiviral drugs can be given. So you can opt for dexamethasone, you can ask for methylprednisolone, whichever is available, whichever is feasible to you. And targeted immunomodulator therapy, tocilizumab, sarilumab, all these things can be given, provided the patient is having cytokine storm syndrome, you have a clinical worsening of symptoms, and you are confirming the diagnosis with the elevated inflammatory mediators and interleukin 6. Vaccine. Obviously, this is one of the important questions from many of my friends and those who are non-medicals, paramedicals, and everyone is waiting for this vaccine. Human vaccine is currently not available. Everything is under trial. Approximately 120 to 120 candidates of vaccines are under development. Some vaccines are currently being tested in phase 1 to 3 trials. Okay. So these are the currently recommended treatment by MOHFW, an unmet need in the management of COVID-19. They basically tocilizumab. Of course, those patients have inflammatory storm syndrome. Those patients cytokine storm syndrome. Those patients have a worsening of symptoms even after all the therapy. As a salvage therapy, or the patients who have elevated inflammatory mediators along with interleukin 6, if it is elevated, definitely you can give a shot of tocilizumab. But keep in mind that tocilizumab can cause severe immunosuppression. You can get a serious or dreadful bacterial infection. Adequate coverage with the broad spectrum antibiotics has to be given, and you need to rule out all the ongoing bacterial sepsis before giving this tocilizumab. And sometimes it may be helpful, sometimes it's detrimental. So it's up to you. So whether to use tocilizumab or not. But there are selected patients who are benefited from tocilizumab. And HCQ off-label. Basically, like HCQ initially, it was promoted as one of the very good drug for COVID-19, as it has some antiviral property and all these things. But seriously, telling that for the past 3 months, like we have not used HCQ in any of our patients. And initially, MOHFW and even ICMR also proposed a prophylactic treatment for COVID-19 with HCQ and all. So when you are giving HCQ for prophylactic treatment or treatment, always you should watch the QT interval. Sometimes it may cause cardiac side effects, cardiac risk of QT prolonged. All these things are there. Always you need to monitor their QT interval and all these things. So it has to be given under supervision, and we have not given this HCQ in our center. Currently, there are no vaccines approved for the prophylaxis of COVID-19. So favipiravir is only approved oral antiviral treatment in India for the treatment of patients with mild to moderate. Note this point: only in mild to moderate patients of COVID-19. So what is this favipiravir? Favipiravir demonstrated antiviral activity against influenza virus. It's not a new drug. It's an old drug only. It has a activity against influenza virus, including those that are oseltamivir resistant. I know that oseltamivir is one of the that's a Tamiflu. That's a brand name they commonly use for this flu, that is swine flu and all. So this favipiravir demonstrated good activity against this influenza virus, including those that are oseltamivir resistant, and has been approved in Japan and China for the treatment of novel influenza viral infections. It is orally available and it is dosed twice daily in treating influenza. It has also been used for post-exposure prophylaxis and the treatment of Ebola viral infection. So what is the rationale of using this favipiravir in COVID-19? As we know, the SARS-CoV-2, it's a single-stranded RNA enveloped virus which targets the cell through the viral structural protein, that is S protein, that commonly called as S protein, that binds to the ACE2 receptor, that is angiotensin converting enzyme receptor. Post-receptor binding, that's TMPRSS2, facilitates this cell entry via the S protein. So these viral polyproteins are synthesized, and the virus then synthesizes its own RNA, then via its RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So structural proteins are synthesis leading to the completion of assembly and release of viral particles. So let me show you on picture that will give a clear clue. So favipiravir is a new type of RNA-dependent RNA polymerase inhibitor. So this is one of the important enzyme that helps to arrest the proliferation of the viral particle. So that's why favipiravir plays a major role in arresting the viremia. In addition to its anti-influenza viral property, favipiravir is capable of blocking the replication of flavivirus, alpha virus, filovirus, bunia virus, arena norovirus, and other RNA virus. So you can see the broad spectrum of action of this very good antiviral drug. The favipiravir is converted into an active phosphoribosylated form, that is favipiravir RTP in the cells. and it is recognized as a substrate by viral RNA polymerase, thus inhibiting the RNA polymerase activity. You could see that it is just cheating the virus. So it forms a active phosphorybostrate forms a link like RTP link, and then it is recognized as a substrate by viral RNA polymerase. Then it thereby inhibits the RNA polymerase activity. Favipiravir may have a potential antiviral action on SARS-CoV-2, which is the RNA virus. Even though, like, we have some studies, it is definitely a speculation. If it is active against all the virus, it should be active against the SARS-CoV-2 also. So you could see this is the structure of SARS-CoV-2 virus, corona, like a spike. You could see the spherical shape structure with surrounding spike proteins. These are the S proteins, which are more antigenic and is responsible for the antigenicity of SARS-CoV-2. So this S protein links to the host. This is the host cell. The site of entry is the respiratory tract. When the patient coughs out, by droplet infections, by droplets and all these things. Okay, aerosol also is possible, but it's less common. Droplet and fomate and all these things. So through droplet infection, it enters in the nasal mucosa, and through the nasal mucosa is rich with ACE receptors. So ACE2 receptors are there in the nasal, is predominantly in the nasal mucosa, is predominantly in the lung, in the lung, and also in the heart. So that's why these are the important areas where the virus sits, and then it causes potential damage. So that's why we are taking this nasal swab. That's why you get the positive rate is high for the SARS-CoV-2. That's the area of entry. And after combining with the receptor host cell, so you could see the membrane fusion endocytosis. It goes inside the cell, host cell. After that, by translation, it is just leading on to polypeptide synthesis. After the synthesis of polypeptides, it leads to proteolysis, which can just give rise to non-structural proteins. After giving non-structural proteins, then with the help of RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, a new RNA is synthesized. Because a new RNA synthesis with all the things, it gets assembled into a new viral particle, and by exocytosis, it goes outside. So what are the various targets? As you know, that virus entering into the host cell, inside the host cell, it just getting xeroxed, and after getting xeroxed, it is just ejected outside with lots of viral particles. So it is using our host energy to just synthesis its own territory. So what are the real targets? You can target on ACE2 receptor, you can target on this TMPRSS2 receptor, you can target on the soluble interleukin 6 receptor. That our important target is this one, that is RNA-dependent RNA polymerase inhibitor, where favipiravir is very active. It inhibits RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, so this RNA synthesis won't be there. So definitely it puts a check on viral proliferation and reduces the viremia in the early phase only. Okay, what are the different dosage that is available, like for COVID-19 treatment? So this is a usual dose of what we follow. So total dose around 1800 milligram BD. So that's on day 1, you should give 1800 milligram BD. So if you are taking 200 milligram tablets, around 9 tablets in the morning, 9 tablets night, evening. And from day 2 to day 14, you should choose 800 milligram BID. If you are taking 200 milligram tablet, that has to be taken 4 tablets each day in the morning and 4 tablets each day in the evening. So what are the contraindications for this favipiravir? So basically, those patients with severe renal impairment, those patients with hepatic impairment, definitely we should rethink whether to give COVID or not. And those patients who are pregnant and those patients who are lactating to the kids. The drug is contraindicated, of course, with the patients who are history of hypersensitivity to favipiravir. Definitely, you should not try in this group of patients. The cautions: the drug can lead to hyperuricemia. One of the important complications should be noted, and this drug should be used in cautions with the history of abnormalities in the metabolism of uric acid or having gout. Frankly speaking, I have used favipiravir for many patients, even for OPD and IPD basis. I have not seen not even a single case of gout that is induced by favipiravir. Maybe just a little bit, laboratory related elevation of hyperuricemia, uric acid elevation is there, and I have not seen any worsening of any joint symptoms or worsening of any gout after using favipiravir. Okay, what is the drug interaction of favipiravir? So when you just use this in patients who are already on ATT, the resorption of uric acid in renal tube is additively promoted, and it can lead to this hyperuricemia, worsening hyperuricemia. When you use along with this repaglinide, that is and for diabetes, the blood concentration in repaglinide is increased due to inhibition of CYP to C8. And the commonest drug what we use in day-to-day practice as a pulmonologist is a theophylline. And even though we are not using this, we are not very fond of theophylline, but theophylline is such a old drug. Still, general practitioners and uh, people are using, over-the-counter over-the-counter drug as over-counter drugs, over-the-counter drugs. So this theophylline is having interaction through xanthine oxidase, may increase the blood concentration of favipiravir. Then you use along with theophylline. Famcivir, the blood concentration of activator of this also these drugs may be reduced as a fiber inhibits the aldehyde oxidase. So famcivir and sulindac, so this concentration of this drug may be reduced as fiber inhibits aldehyde oxidase. One important thing to be noted is that most of the drugs are metabolized in the liver, that is mainly by the cytochrome P450 enzyme system, as you know. But whereas favipiravir is not metabolized by cytochrome P450, it is mainly metabolized by aldehyde oxidase and partially by xanthine oxidase. As I already told you, should not be used in pregnant women or women who are, can be pregnant. Patients should be advised to discontinue the lactation in lactating mothers. Safety and efficacy is not established in pediatric patients. I don't have any experience in using this molecule in pediatric patients. Should be administered after observing the general condition, mainly for geriatric patients. And of course, those patients who are CKD and patients with severe hepatic involvement, all, they definitely should not be given as an option for the treatment. So let's discuss some of my cases. This is actually a 62-year-old male who is a known case of COPD, came to my OPD with chief complaints of fever for 5 days, generalized malaise for 5 days, cough which is there but is aggravated for the past 3 days. Actually, this patient was a chronic patient. They used to follow up regularly with me. He's a known COPD patient on compliant very well with the therapy, with all as per the guidelines. He was taking LABA/LAMA combination, and he was vaccinated for flu and also for the pneumonia with pneumococcal vaccines. This patient came with 5 days history of fever and history of generalized malaise and cough aggravated for the past 3 days. Fever for the past 3 days, which was low grade, not as with chills and rigors. Cough for 3 days, which is a dry cough. No specific characters were there. Patient is a known case of COPD on treatment with LABA/LAMA and regular follow-up. He is a known hypertensive for the past 20 years on medication, not a known diabetes mellitus ischemic artist. On examination, his febrile SpO2 of 96% room air, RS bilateral vesicular blood stones, which is reduced in intensity as you expect in COPD. No other adventitious zones were here. Other systems are normal. So why I just put this slide is that these are the group of patients that you should be very careful. You should not allow them to stay in home. These are the group of patients who are at a high risk of progression of the disease. Even though at the time of presentation they may present you with a mild illness, but still you should watch closely in this patient in this group of patients, because the patient can progress to a moderate to severe category. Any patient with the age more than 50, any patient with a history of CAD or CKD, any patient with a poorly controlled diabetes mellitus, like who have the poor glycemic status at the time of admission, patient with hypertension, any patient with chronic respiratory disease, particularly COPD, asthma, bronchiectasis, or interstitial lung disease, any patient with chronic liver disease, a patient with autoimmune or cognitive disorders, patient with malignancies or treatment without treatment with chemotherapy, post-transplant patient that is solid or bone marrow transplantation, those who receive bone marrow transplantation with or without immunosuppressives, obese patients, especially morbid obese individuals with BMI of more than 35 to 40. So all these patients have a high risk of progression based on their parameters. And other clinical parameters at the time of admission, any patients who presents to you with a respiratory rate of more than 30, or a patient with SpO2 less than 94, or patient with tachycardia, heart rate more than 100, patient with hypotension, systolic BP less than 90, ultrasound, all these patients have a high risk of progression to severe disease. So other lab parameters like lymphopenia less than 20 with NL ratio greater than 17, CRP greater than 100 milligram per DL, serum ferritin greater than 300 microgram per ml, D-dimer greater than 1000 nanogram per ml at the time of presentation, serum LDH greater than 450. All these lab parameters once again gives a clue that these patients can progress to a severe form. So these patients, as this patient is more than 50 years of age, having a chronic disease, but it's well under control with all the therapies. He received all the vaccination as per our advice. uh, this patient, more than 50 years of age, having COPD, all these things are there. So what do you want to do? Like whether you will advise for home isolation or you ask for admission? Definitely, considering the age and considering the chronic respiratory disease what he's having, so it's better to admit this patient and follow up this patient. But we advise for admission, but he just denied for admission. So and I advise for RT-PCR testing and other investigation. SARS-CoV-2, as per our suspicion, RT-PCR was detected. The diagnosis was COVID-19 pneumonia with COPD. So CBC was like this, like like he was having lymphopenia, lymphocyte less than 90, and platelet around 1.9 lakhs with HP of 11 grams per DL, with TC of around 7,600 cells per cubic millimeter. CRP 15, D-dimer 0.2 nanogram per DL, ferritin 235, everything, all the inflammatory markers within the normal range. Okay, what are the investigations that you should do when you see a COVID patient at the time of admission? In case of mild illness, like you could ask for a CBC, RBS, to use CBC to look for how is that, like whether a patient of having lymphopenia, or to just calculate the NL ratio and all these things. RBS, as you know, the poor glycemic status is one of the bad prognostic factor for the progression of severe disease. I think RBS is justifiable. ECG and HbA1c, definitely the patient is diabetic. And D-dimer, if you are starting of favipiravir, D-dimer, that's must for all the mild patients. If you are starting on tablet favipiravir, as I already told you, severe hepatic impairment and severe renal involvement should be a contraindication for giving favipiravir. So you should have a baseline LFT and RFT, serum electrolytes, of course uric acid. So as I told you, hyperuricemia can occur after giving favipiravir. So but it won't cause symptoms or gout as far as my knowledge is concerned. So you can just do a baseline serum uric acid. In moderate case, same thing. Complete blood count along with NL ratio. Optional will be lymphocyte CRP ratio, LFT, RFT, RBS, serum electrolytes, stool disease, X-ray. X-ray can be negated if you are going for a CT thorax. And biomarkers, all the inflammatory biomarkers has to be repeated in moderate cases. CRP, D-dimer, serum ferritin, LDH, and procalcitonin in case of suspicious of bacterial infections. Sorry. And troponin, INT, PTINR, ABG, CT thorax if available, blood culture if you are suspecting any bacterial co-infection, and the interleukin 6 if you are planning for tocilizumab. In case of severe, same thing has to be repeated. Along with that, you can ask for a serum cortisol, you can ask for interleukin 6, you can ask for magnesium, calcium electrolytes, and echo, and serum electrolytes, and serum lactate also, of course, to see severe sepsis. Advice for admission, but patient denied. Insisted us for a home-based scan. Regarding this patient, I'm just telling. So then I asked for a CT thorax. So this was a CT thorax for the patient. You could see. One second. So you could see a large emphysematous bulla. You could see the large emphysematous bulla, a typical saber-shaped trachea, as you get in a COPD. You can see the emphysematous bulla is there, and signs of COPD. Central lobe emphysema is there. You could see. Sorry. So you could see here the peripheral form of consolidation. Let me show you one interesting finding. You could see here the patient also have a cavity, like in a consolidation. You could see a lesion, like a cavity, which is not very typical of a COVID-19 illness. But of course, this patient had peripheral multiple focus of peripheral consolidation along with a few cavitating lesions. So how we managed? So even though we insisted a lot, he just preferred for home isolation, and we got a consent for that. And patient was started on favipiravir on day 7 of illness. Very important. So he presented to me on day 4 or day 5. So RT-PCR result came on day 7. So on day 7 of illness was favipiravir started as per his history. The same as per the regimen, 1,800 milligram twice daily on day 1, and 800 milligram twice daily from day 2, along with the broad spectrum oral antibiotics. Since this patient is more than 50 years of age, having a COPD, all these things, home-based, enoxaparin was given, 40 milligram supplements once daily, He was getting this actually with the help of their relative was sister, and she was giving this enoxaparin of subcutaneous dose, and tab NSL 67 milligram TDS, another supportive care. And for cough, we have given levodopa based cough syrup preparations. On third day, no fever spikes was there. On fifth day, myalgia and generalized malaise improved. He was maintaining saturation throughout in room air around 96. The patient was followed up daily with teleconsultation. The patient was also advised to continue his MDA. Repeat swab was done on the fifth day after initiation of fever, which is reported as negative. This was once again an interesting case. She's a 50-year-old female who presented to our OPD with complaints of loss of taste. That's what I told, for 5 days. Myalgia for 5 days. History of loss of appetite for 5 days. No history of fever. No history of cough or dyspnea. Known diabetes malrespiration and oral hypoglycemics. Patient had a history of loss of taste. Similar history of loss of taste for us 5 days back. Tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. And he was advised for home isolation along with this lady. On examination, nothing was remarkable, and with a positive contact history and typical symptoms advised, we advised for RT-PCR testing. So that came as positive. As she was known diabetic and HbA1c is poorly controlled, once again we asked for a CT thorax because this is a diabetic. We asked for a CT thorax. This was a CT thorax. So literally almost like it was. So you could see that's that it's only minimal involvement is there. So only few peripheral space opacity, mainly in the right lower lobe, the peripheral it is there. Otherwise, it is almost like only mild form. So, but definitely COVID pneumonia is there. Other investigations like TC of around 9,600 with 65% of neutrophils and 22% of lymphocytes. CRP around 22. D-dimer was around 0.6 nanogram per DL. And ferritin was around 320. The patient was started on 5-Favipiravir antibiotics and supportive care. On 7th day, she was symptomatically improved. Interesting point to be noted, her son was in home isolation and had a persistent symptoms as we are taking only supportive treatment. So that's the point I just told you. So this fellow got COVID-19 positive report just 5 days before his mother, but he was on only supportive treatment with multivitamins and all these things. Whereas this lady took consultation from us and she was started on Favipiravir, and she was symptomatically improved. Even her loss of taste has improved a bit when compared to his son. And finally, we made a diagnosis COVID pneumonia with atypical presentation with agousia, which responded very well to Favipiravir. So to summarize the facts, COVID is caused by SARS-CoV-2 is a single-strand RNA envelope virus. RNA-dependent RNA polymerase is a crucial enzyme required for multiplication of virus in the human cell. Favipiravir is a new type of RNA-dependent RNA polymerase inhibitor. In addition to its anti-influenza viral property, Favipiravir is capable of blocking the replication of RNA virus. By virtue of its action on RNA polymerase enzyme, Favipiravir can be considered as a potential option for the treatment of COVID. Currently, Favipiravir is the only oral antiviral treatment approved in India for the treatment of patients with mild to moderate COVID-19 patients. With this, I will end my presentation, and if you have any queries, so that we can have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the enlightenment presentation. It was a good speech, and sir, we have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
Shall we start the question, sir?
Yes, please.
Sir, first question, sir, which patient benefits with Favipiravir based on CT finding?
Okay. So that's what initially actually there is a confusion that which group of patient we should call it as a mild to moderate, severe. I already told you. According to initial classification by MOHFW, mild should be only with upper respiratory symptoms. No lung pneumonia should be there. No evidence of pneumonia should be there. But whereas nowadays, people are coming with a CT scan only. People are so much educated that they are going directly to the scan center and they are doing CT scan without our knowledge. Okay. When you do a CT scan, you could see some form of patch in the lung. Okay. So according to me, those patients, all the symptomatic patients of COVID-19 pneumonia who presents to you early, So all these patients has to be given an option of antiviral therapy along with other armamentarium, along with other along with this multivitamin and all we are giving. So along with that, you should try antiviral. Maybe I should not. Maybe I may not prefer this, antiviral. Maybe in you know young immunocompetent individuals, and it is a must for old patients, and it's a must for the patients with comorbidities, and a must for the patients who are already having any chronic respiratory disease. As I just showed you in one of my slide that there are certain group of patients having high risk of progression, those patients having a very poor CT score, and those patients having any patch lung involvement at all. So those patients, like according to CT, if you are asking me like which patients, if you want to start a paper, any patients who are having COVID-19 pneumonia, having a patch, having a peripheral consolidation in the CT, definitely we should give an option of fiber to this patient. Even though we have a mixed thought that whether to use antiviral or not, some people are telling it is like a placebo. So I won't accept that. This is not a you should not try something new. So you know that because there are many people who are taking antibiotics of their own, even for URT and all, they are taking azithromycin, they are taking amoxicillin and all. Who is carrying? Who is taking the test? Who is diagnosing? Nothing. So basically, for a life-threatening disease, there is no harm in taking, as you have evidence that it is working for selected group of patients. Why you want to take a chance? And my view is that those patients who are having high risk of progression, definitely they should be monitored and they should be given option of antiviral therapy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Second question, sir. Sir,
Yeah.
this favipiravir should we start in suspected cases before the reports confirm?
Actually, see, Favipiravir is approved mainly for COVID-19. As you know that DCGA has given approval for initially for some company, and I think we are having Favipiravir with a lot of companies, a lot of pharma companies.
Hello, sir. Sir, hello, sir. Are you on the line, sir?
Yes, there is some signal issue was there. That's why. Can you
Yes,
hear
sir.
me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Now I am hearing, sir.
yeah, what was the question? I just forgot.
Sir, whether favipiravir should we start in suspected cases
Yes.
before report confirms?
Yes. Actually, that was a very good question. Actually, you know that Favipiravir is approved by DCGA mainly for COVID-19 pneumonia, and definitely the report is must before starting. Ideally, Favipiravir, because like with clinical symptoms, we may not be very sure that it is 100% COVID-19 pneumonia, because these symptoms are non-specific. Fever, cough, cold can be there in any viral illness, so it is not necessarily a COVID-19. So Government of India and DCGA has approved mainly this Favipiravir only for COVID-19 pneumonia. So if you are strongly suspecting, of course, off-label you can give. But with the prescription, if you want to give a prescription of Favipiravir, RT-PCR report is must. At least any RT-PCR or antigen test is must before prescribing Favipiravir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Third question is, sir, how long this favipiravir should be recommended?
How long?
How long we should recommend this favipiravir, sir?
Yes. See, actually, that's a very good question. Even though the pharma people are, all the pharma companies are marketing up to 2 weeks, according to me, nobody knows the exact duration, how much time we need to give this fiber with. But according to me, like I used to give roughly around 10 days, just to keep us 10 to 14 days only. So those patients who are having prolonged symptoms, for example, there are many patients where after starting favipiravir, the fever just comes down in third or fifth day only. This is my experience. Okay, fifth day only fever, deference of fever will be there, and now most of the symptoms will be reduced. Maybe with the myalgia and body weakness will be there, but other symptoms and all will go off in just 3 to 5 days after starting favipiravir. There are certain patients, for them, even up to 7 days also fever will be there. And those patients who are old, those patients who are immunocompromised on long-term steroids, on autoimmune disease with long-term steroids, or patients who are diabetes mellitus who are poorly controlled with their therapies. So these patients have a prolonged viremia. Okay, those patients who are for whom you are expecting a prolonged viremia, it's better to prolong the therapy of favipiravir for 2 weeks. Otherwise, 10 days is a good duration.
Okay, sir. Sir, next question. Sir, you know very well, so now the second wave of COVID is affecting the European countries. They are
Yeah.
facing a lot of issues.
Yes.
When we are expecting India, sir, about the second wave? Any idea about that?
Actually, see, second wave is basically, it's only speculation. Okay, so there are some European countries like where new cases are coming and all. So basically, I'm not telling that COVID won't come again, even though the peak has reduced now significantly. Definitely, you are going to face the same issue because it's actually a infection that is spread by droplet. It needs some host only. Okay, so definitely we may expect a second wave, but it's very difficult to predict when it will come. Okay, lot of prediction scores are there. All the prediction scores, it can give you on guidance only, and nothing is validated. So we may get a second wave, but the second wave may not be terrific like what we faced till now,
Thank you, sir.
because we
Thank
learned a lot. COVID taught us a lot. So
you.
because
Yes.
of all our self protection protocols, because of all the people who are just using mask, and but nowadays I'm not seeing people wearing mask and all, but that has to be continued according to me. So the wearing good mask, social distancing, and all these things has to be continued for long duration, as we may expect the COVID cases even sporadic also. The same way, like we faced flu infection, like swine flu and all. There is a cluster of case was epidemic. After that, every 3 months, 4 months, some cases are there in ICU or what, if you test. So the same way the COVID will be there. Lot of cases are there. Now second wave, some case will be there. Then third wave, some case will be there. And finally, sporadic case will be there. So I think, the COVID-19 will be there for long duration, according to me. Maybe not like a pandemic,
Okay.
like maybe like other upper respiratory tract infection and all. So definitely virulence should go down, and that's a good thing for as per the Darwin's theory. As per the theory, like there should be end for any beginning. Okay, I think it will end. Okay,
Thank you, sir. Thanks for
yeah,
your kind words. I hope this situation will end as soon as possible, sir. Sir, question is over, sir. Now we came to the end of the session. So before closing, first of all, on behalf of Sun Pharma, I'm thanking you, sir. Thanking our eminent speaker, Dr. S. Devarajan, for giving his valuable time to us and sharing such an enlightening presentation about Favipiravir. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you very much. Also,
thank you
I
so
would
much.
like to thank. Also, I would like to thank all the doctors, each and every doctors, for taking out your valuable time and being a part of this webinar. I hope this webinar is informative to all of you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And before closing, I am wishing you advance happy Diwali. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you all, and wish you all a happy and safe Diwali, and maintain the social distancing, wear mask, and follow all the universal precautions. Definitely this is going to end very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So now I am ending the meeting.